The Activity Monitor in SQL Server gives you a view into the current activity in the SQL Server instance. This can be of enormous help in finding problems before they get out of hand or finding a problem that causes slow server performance. In fact, anytime a SQL Server instance is behaving oddly, you can often get right to the root of the problem, or at least get a good idea of what's going on by viewing Activity Monitor. So let's take a look at this feature of Management Studio. You can view the Activity Monitor by right-clicking the name of the server instance in Object Explorer and selecting Activity Monitor from the pop-up menu. Now, the activity on this server is not going to really be all that interesting. I don't have any processes running against it. I haven't run any queries against it really yet, and so forth. So it isn't going to be showing very much activity. But I can show you the different features of Activity Monitor, and you can imagine what it'll be like if this was a heavily used production net. And you can imagine what it would be like if this was a heavily used production system. So the first section is the overview section here. This provides a graphical view into the current server activity. And these graphs present information about the percent of processor time being used, the number of waiting tasks, and the database I/O in megabytes per second. And you can scroll over here, and there's also a batch requests per second. So these are overall metrics into the current level of activity. They're updated every second or so, so if there was any real activity on the server, you'd see these being updated in real time. And then there's some additional sections down here. I just have to click on each section to open it. The Processes section displays information about database connections and the types of tasks that each are performing. The data is listed by Server Process ID. If I expand this a little bit, you can see the names of the column headers there. This is also sometimes referred to as the SPID, the Server Process ID. And you can right-click on any of the Server Process IDs in order to launch SQL Server Profiler to trace the activity on that particular process. So as you can see, there's various processes, most of them going into the master database. That's the main database that SQL Server uses in order to manage the overall instance of the server. And then there's also a TempDB, which is kind of a scratchpad database for storing information temporarily during the execution of code. And there's various other metrics that you can view there. Next is the resource waits. This indicates the amount of time that various threads are waiting for resources, such as memory and processor time. This is a very important panel to view if the server is acting very slow, is performing very slowly, because you may have many conflicting requests that are trying to get access to a resource and they're being blocked. And so here's where you can see information about those kinds of problems. Then there's data file I/O. This shows database and log file input and output information, including statistics on the amount of data read from and written to the disk. This information is the sort of thing that can help you find databases that are being especially hard hit with activity, causing disk activity to be bottlenecked for performance. And as you can see, there's various entries here for various databases. But there isn't much activity going on. And then finally, there's this recent expensive queries section. This is some nice information, particularly when you're writing queries and there seems to be any kind of problems. So it displays information about recent queries that made the greatest demands on various server resources. And you can use this information to identify problem queries that are making unusually high demands on the system, because very often it may be possible to rewrite queries so that they don't make such intense demands. And as you can see, it updates itself periodically. SQL Server is running various code items in the background. But most of the items listed here are the results of my creating the various databases. And so you can see various insert into queries and so forth that populated some of the databases with data, particularly the Northwind database.